t-shirts in the shop. Just go to pgttcm.com. Check out all of our cool t-shirts and stickers. Heck, we even got some shelf curtains in there. Keep clean, look cool, have cool stickers to put on stuff. Join us on Patreon and get a free sticker. Or don't. It's up to you.
Hey everyone, it's me, DB. This is People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. It's me, DB Spitzer, and to my virtual right, as always, Farmer Dave. Farmer Dave, how are you doing this week?
I am virtually well.
All right, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. How has everything been at the farm this week?
It has been cold.
It has been cold out at the cemetery as well. No kids have gotten their tongues frozen to tombstones yet this year, thankfully. But hey,
It's early.
it's very early in the season. It's our first bit of real cold, I want to say. Last week was cold and there was flurries of snow, if you remember. But this week it's just cold. It's cold and it's snowing. And how much snow do you have out there?
About a half an inch.
Yeah. It's down here. It's just started to stick. I think we have like maybe a good 1/8 inch at most, but I don't know if we should be even recording it at this point. But yeah. This isn't what people came here for. They didn't come here to hear about the weather. They came here to hear about spooky space monsters and Dungeons and Dragons, and to hear from someone within the Pacific Northwest or West Coast. I don't know, someone within either the fandom or writing or something, an interview.
So are you talking about our interview?
Yeah. We generally have someone.
Yes,
that
we
you
do.
talk to.
We
Yeah.
have actually somebody who covers quite a few things,
Oh,
and
cool.
that is Frances Paya.
Oh, cool.
And
cool.
she, as well as a writer, she is a patent judge, but she also is in charge of a youth writing program in the Pacific Northwest, as well as quite a few other writing projects. And so we're going to talk a little bit about such mundane things as water and traditions and inspiring kids to read and write.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds cool. That sounds really cool. And yeah, we'll have that going on in the middle part of the show, as always. And today we'll be talking about I don't know, I guess I want to call them the middle planes, the neutral planes, but not
the flyover planes.
Yeah, the flyover planes. This is like your North Dakota, South Dakota. I really don't know what the flyover states are in general. I just assume Wyoming's one of them, but yeah. All right, everyone. So cue that theme music.
You're listening to KZOM, Oleander Public Radio.
Greetings, listeners. It is I, DB Spitzer and Farmer Dave, here once again to talk to you about the Cthulhu mythos, its books, its monsters, its unfortunate human casualties, its timeline in general, and even its tangential bits, like the dreamlands or things of a weird nature that are Lovecraftian leaning. Once more we head into those dark woods, further feeling those malevolent forces upon us. Once again we walk down the lightless stone staircase in the middle of nowhere.
You're listening to KZOM.
Hey, we are back from the theme music, and this week we're going to be talking about some spooky stuff regarding Nyarlathotep. And we've got the Queen in Red and Set, but only kinda.
So I got a question for you.
Sure.
Where does the Queen in Red first appear?
As far as I can see, it's the Malus Monstrum of...
So where did they get the name?
Oh. It sounds like an easy send up to the King in Yellow.
Well,
but
it is. It's a
could-
line in a Blue Oyster Cult song called ETI, Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And one of
Gotcha.
the references that they have in that song is the King in Yellow and the Queen in Red.
Okay.
And it's actually, it's on their Agents of Fortune album. And it is the song on the A side right after their most famous song and arguably their best song, Don't Fear the Reaper.
Sure.
And I actually, until I started researching this, I mean, I'm a middle-aged white guy from California, so I have to have a certain degree of Blue Oyster Cult knowledge.
Yeah.
Or I could not have passed, junior high school. But it's actually a decent song. I wasn't familiar with, but it's got a lot of things that are just it came out, I think, 76, 78, I'm not sure.
Right.
But it has references to ETI, extraterrestrial intelligence, before the movie E.T. came out. And it also has quite a few references to the Men in Black before, the Men in Black movie.
Sure.
So it originally, and you're right, it gets kind of codified in Malleus Monstrum, but the writer, I believe it was John Tyne, used it as a reference to describe a sort of succubus character driven on a wall in one of the adventures. And then they decided, well, we're just going to codify her. And there's a lot of reference, but not a lot of. So I thought originally they were referring in Monstrous Maelstrom to like official scenarios. But there's like one that talks about how being in Weimar, Germany, that there's sort of, it takes the form of an androgynous MC, which is obviously a reference to at a cabaret, which is obviously a reference to the Joel Grey and combining with the Liza Minnelli character in Cabaret.
Sure.
But I went through pretty thoroughly the Berlin Wicked City, which is basically the Weimar Republic supplement for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. And I think it's a Buyout All has another adventure that takes place, and I couldn't find any reference. So I imagine that that's more of a hook than a story. So if anyone knows of a story that actually takes place in 1930s Germany that has the Queen in Red or a scenario, let me know. But I think it was supposed to be a hook.
Okay, because go for it.
And then in the Maleforium, it talks about several different forms. I believe that she takes a psychologist form, but any sort of female lead. So she literally is almost an avatar that has avatars.
Yeah. And I was going to say, this is something that if I was going to use, I would use maybe with more like of a chest motif or a cards motif. Like Queen
or
of
a Twisted Alice in Wonderland.
Exactly. Head towards a Twisted Alice in Wonderland, like a way to color your Carcosa. Like, what if it's a way that Nyarlathotep piggybacks off of like whatever Haster's doing, whatever the King in Yellow's doing, piggybacks off of it and adds a little red swirl into it. You're no longer following the yellow brick road. It now has roses lined upon it to your weird fantasy destination, to your ever-changing city. You're gonna see touches of red in it now. You're not just gonna see a yellow sign. There's gonna be a red circle around it. Like, this is like a way that Nyarlathotep piggybacks off of it and adds a little special spice, being like, oh, you thought it was bad before. You met me. I'm going to give it some spice and just make it rough for you.
No, absolutely. And as far as I know, that it's exclusively in Chaosium's work.
Sure. Yeah, I believe so.
Now, I did find actually a short story on the Delta Green website,
Okay.
the Queen in Red.
Yeah.
So, but even if we separate Delta Green from Chaosium, which legally I think they are now, it's still from the same well there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's from the same site as it's the same source, but so it's not traditional Lovecraftian,
No.
although it is by the way of the role playing game.
Yeah, no, and because of the fact that it's like so ambiguous, so just kind of not enough description that there's some ideas here. Yeah, you could do a lot with this. And me, I think the lowest hanging fruit with a name like Queen in Red is chess. If you have like a traditional like black and red chessboard or black and red set, or if you have like cards. Cards is another one. I'm sure you can find red queens out there, and like if you're gonna really grasp at straws, or even not even really grasp at straws, like go with a Hella Bathory kind of thing. Go with a Hungarian countess who refers to herself as the Queen in Red, and then have her like maybe have a cult to Nyarlathotep. Think your horror solving crew is going to be fighting vampires. They're fighting vampires of an Azathothean strain. There you go, right there.
How about a World War I female ace?
Oh, yeah. There we go. We have Queen in Red, our Red Baroness type character. And I was like, well, we don't have to keep going with females. And I'm like, well, actually, we are going with queens. And unless you're going to do some sort of like Freddie Mercury doppelganger, I think Queen in Red's pretty cool like this. Next up, we have Set. And this is a form of Nyarlathotep pretending to be Set. That it's like Set is an established god, and it's like so's Nyarlathotep, but Nyarlathotep's just pretending to be Set and setting up cults of Set that aren't of Set, that people are supposed to think are Set, but are actually Nyarlathotep. Does that make sense?
Strangely enough, it did.
Okay. All right.
And of course the most famous in the mythos version of Set is going to be Howard's from Conan.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And where Howard is no problem taking, Lovecraft didn't either, taking an existing name of a deity or something like Dagon, and then sort of mythosing it out. So Howard's Set is kind of a mixture between the Egyptian Set as well as the devil.
Yeah.
Now, interesting, we think of Set as the bad guy in Egyptian mythology. He didn't start out that way.
No.
So originally, Set was the deity of foreigners. But then as Egypt gets invaded by foreigners, his alignment, they start telling stories with him as the bad guy, as foreigners invade and try to take over Egypt. His association with foreigners makes him the other. And if you were writing a story and or a role-playing game, that can sort of, we have talked a little bit about the faceless god, where Block says, that Nyarlathotep is basically written out. But maybe during this time, that's when he started posing as Set, presenting himself as the true form of Nyarlathotep is removed. Again, that's just sort of an idea I haven't seen come up in fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to write a book about it, I want to cut.
Yeah. No, that's how I definitely see Set appearing, is like that. I like the idea of Set being like hundreds of years, thousands of years later, a cult of Set appearing, and it's Nyarlathotep and some of his other followers that are like, hey, this cult we've got going on worshiping so and so, maybe some aspect of Nyarlathotep that's in Egypt. Let's make some more money. Let's go to Cairo. We'll drum up some money. We'll get a cult of Set going, and then once everyone's going along with it, we'll slowly start to shift towards Nyarlathotep. No one will be the wiser. Everyone will slowly accept it. It'll be like a frog in the pot of water, everyone. And Nyarlathotep will be happy. We'll be happy. We'll make lots of money, and we'll be in Cairo.
and now there is a third version of Set.
Yeah.
In the mythos, and that is as a name of Yig.
Oh.
So
okay.
Yig, I think it's the Curse of Yig, or one of the other stories that Lovecraft helped edit. There's a reference that Set, or that Yig is Set, or is associated with Set, or that Setians, called this deity Set, or thought it was Set.
Yeah. Okay.
So there is a references in the mythos as Yig being Set, and that's basically because, first of all, Lovecraft was getting paid. Sometimes the only fruit money he got was for editing it, and if that's the way, I don't know, the idea of Set as Yig was Lovecraft, or I think was it Hazelhead that wrote those?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, and people write us if we're wrong.
Yeah. So, and there, I get the older women that were in love with Lovecraft and wrote stories with him kind of confused sometimes. But we don't. I don't know who did the reference first, but there's always these throwaway references to real world deities or people in these stories.
Oh yeah. Quite often. This is an example for sure.
And before you write us, yes, it was Zela Bishop.
Okay.
I get Celia and Hazel and so and Sonia Green, sometimes even confused the three of them.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, it was Zelia Bishop that wrote Curse of Yig with Lovecraft.
Gotcha. Well, we've got the Curse of Set by D.B. Spitzer and David Heath, where Set is a cult of no. I like our idea of like a cult of Nyarlathotep. Grabbing up the straggling bits of other cults and being like, we're a cult of Set.
Which is well within sort of the way that the Nyarlathotep is that's his persona. He is among other things besides the messenger, he is the trickster.
Yeah. I could imagine, and this is a little bit different than Set though. This is if you've lived in college towns, I'm sure.
So I've lived in towns that have colleges.
Okay. So one thing that happens in college towns and towns that have colleges is cults. They pop up. And my thought was, oh man, Nyarlathotep probably has a few college cults.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So let's see. Up next, you've got an interview, and then we are going to be talking about the Central Plains. No, not the Central Plains. We're going to be talking about the neutral plains of Dungeons and Dragons. And
Thank you once again for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. You can help show your support by going to the show notes and following any of the links that'll tell you how to support the show and how to support our guests. And thank you to all of our guests who you can find in the show notes. Rate, review, subscribe, and remember, patrons get priority access to asking us questions, suggesting topics, even, I don't know, submitting stuff. Actually, you don't have to be a patron to submit anything. That's how Dave got on the show, and that's how you can get on the show too. It's the People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. Rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends. Thank you for listening. Back to the show.
So we're now at that part of the show where DB leaves me, but I'm not completely alone. So even though I don't have my trusty companion DB with me today, we've got a special guest, and that is Francis and Lu-Pai Ippolito, and I'm so sorry if I mispronounced the name.
That's pretty close, Francis Lu-Pai Ippolito. So you're fine, and it's such a pleasure to be here as to keep you company and to stand in while DB has gone off to other adventures.
Well, thank you. I will send him your best. But maybe if you could introduce yourself a little bit to our audience.
Sure. So I'm based in the Pacific Northwest, and by day I'm a patent judge and chasing after children. But when I'm not doing that, I'm doing a lot of writing in a lot of genres. But my first love has always been horror because horror has been such a part of my upbringing, childhood in the 80s. And so, yeah, I write short stories. I do nonfiction. I do children's. I do adults. I do poetry. Pretty much like I try a little bit of everything and just, really enjoy exploring all the different ways that we can do some genre bending, actually.
Excellent. Yeah, I love and I think my first experience, and probably most of ours, of genre bending was when I was 6 or 7, Saturday morning watching Scooby-Doo.
Hmm.
And I realized, wait a minute, this could be like a detective and a ghost story. And I must have been like 9 when I was trying to put this together.
Yeah, and I just wanted the van. So.
Yeah, well, there's that too. So you also are working on a horror writer collective, correct?
I am. So I'm a member of the Horror Writers Association, and that's an international group, but it's primarily in the U.S. And
Mm-hmm.
even though it's such a large group, dedicated pretty much to the community of readers, writers, watchers of dark fiction, or I guess really it's nonfiction as well. Um, we also have a lot of local chapters in different regions. And one of the things that I've been working on with a group of HWA members is creating a local chapter in the Portland metro area. That'll probably come together at the beginning of 2023. And the idea is that basically, I think when a lot of us go to workshops and we work with other writers, horror writers don't always. We stand out, I think, because some of what we write does make other writers a little bit uncomfortable, and readers too, because we thrive in writing about the things that might make us uncomfortable and unsettled, and that's a lot of what horror is to help people process through their stress in their own lives by watching it play out and watching people survive in stories. And so that's what we want to do. We want to kind of collect ourselves together in this area and do some projects together and also just build community.
Excellent. And so it's at the beginning steps, right? Too, it's just starting out.
It is just starting out. We have quite a few members who are local, and we've started having some informal meetings and reaching out to see who's available. But there's a lot of interest, and we're gonna rope people in, and including yourself, if we can get you to come over. But
You had me at the words horror and writing.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think there's a really robust, mature writing community here, and I have always felt so welcome within all writing communities, but in particular with dark fantasy and dark fiction, just because I think it takes a certain type of writer who really wants to just be in that unsettled, uncomfortable space and just process it, and then create from that area and create from those feelings. And really interesting people, and I might even say a little bit wild and weird, but it all works out. And some of the nicest people, really, because we get all our killing out on the page, so there's nothing left.
Absolutely. And one thing I when I was younger and I started writing, my thought was, it's the duty of the artist to shock his audience or her audience.
Yeah, and then to take the audience and the reader on an adventure or journey, but to not leave or abandon that reader behind, and to
Exactly.
yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you're also working on a writing program with youth, aren't you?
I am. I'm a co-chair in the Portland area for the Young Willamette Writers. And so it's a part of Willamette Writers, which is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to helping writers in the community. But Young Willamette Writers is a little bit different. It's designed to bring authors in to provide free writing workshops to middle grade and high school students. And so what I do is I reach out into the community, not just our local one, but all the writing community at large, and find authors who have the time and the desire to teach young writers. So we bring them in. So I usually schedule. I bring them in. We go to the Beaverton City Library, and the students come in and they spend an hour learning about, for example, speculative poetry. We've got world building and character development coming up.
Cool.
We've done graphic novels. We've got plot and plotting, like how to plot out an outline, a novel. That's coming up as well.
Oh, wow.
And it's local, so the students can come in person. But my goal was that, if you have a child in that age range who wants to write but isn't getting what he or she needs, or they need from their community or their school for whatever reason, that child should have access to writing classes. And so we also do it as a hybrid. So there's a Zoom component too. So every class is Zoomed. So any child from anywhere, middle school, high school, who wants to learn how to write can Zoom in, and it's completely free. And once
Excellent.
once a student has gone to a couple of the meetings, we usually invite those students to come to the conference in August, and they can meet publishers, meet agents, meet other writers. And I've had students pitch to publishers if they haven't. I mean, these kids are amazing. They're just young writers of this particular age. They're fearless, and they're so imaginative, and they're fast. It takes me a while sometimes to come up with an idea I think that'll work. And they don't necessarily have the same life experience as you and I, or maybe a much more mature writer would, but their ability to create on the spot is amazing. Within 5 minutes, they've got a whole story.
They and I think I was too at that age, very nimble. You hit a plot roadblock and you work around it. Where I'll spend like a whole day trying to figure out that hole in my story. The kid, 2-3 minutes, okay.
Yeah, and it just makes sense to them because they live in a totally different they just have a different perspective on life, that they're always processing and taking in information, and very differently than how I think adult minds work, especially after stresses of adulting, right? But
Yeah.
it's always great to see how kids open up and they share their work with each other. And I
Mm.
think that sometimes school writing can be a little bit more formulaic and more
Yeah.
structured because it has to be in a lot of ways because you're teaching mechanics, right? You're teaching grammar,
Exactly.
but with our writing workshops, it's not about the mechanics. It's just about writing and creating and sharing. And so a lot of kids enjoy that component because that's something that they might not feel that they can do with school writing.
Yeah. I had a high school creative writing teacher who said that, creative writing is knowing how to break the rules.
Mhm. Exactly. Learn them and then bend them or break them or ignore them. you know.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if
We're
anyone,
looking at you, E. Cummings.
exactly. So if anyone out there has a child, a young writer who is looking for an opportunity to y- write, email yww@willametwriters.org, and yeah, I can send out the information. You can sign up, and we do it from September through June. July is a break, and then in August we have our conference.
Excellent. And we'll definitely have some links there.
Yeah,
Now,
we will.
with you, I mean, the you sound, I mean, right now, just the things that we've discussed, it seems to me like you're doing the work of three different people. Yet your personal writings, what are some of the things that influence some your personal writings?
Yeah, so I'm an immigrant. I was born in Taiwan and I moved here when I was 3. And we lived primarily in the South, my family.
Hmm.
And we had Chinese restaurants in the South, and like Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and then in like
Okay.
Leesburg, Florida. So, I have that immigrant experience from the 80s, and we moved around quite a bit. So I lived in the South, I lived in the Midwest, I lived in South Dakota, I lived in California, and I've lived on the East Coast and now in Pacific Northwest. So what I do a lot in my writing is trying to incorporate that immigrant American experience,
Okay.
particularly the Chinese American experience, into my stories, but also bringing in the mythology and the folklore that I kind of grew up learning about and continue to learn about.
Okay.
And for horror, there's a lot of culturally, ghost stories are fairly common because of the traditions in the past of ancestor worship and the belief that if you don't take care of your family's
Yeah.
spirits and souls, then you might get some resentful ghosts or hungry ghosts that come back and not leave you alone. And so I kind of go into that, but there's also a lot of other things, not just ghosts. There's creatures. There's I wouldn't call them like fairy tales, but folk tales, or a whole like wealth of mythology to draw from. And I pull a little bit from all of that, but mainly it's very grounded in a particular lived experience. And so that's what I really focus on for right now. I mean, I think I'm expanding it to kind of different areas as I continue to grow as a writer. But for a lot of my work for the last few years, it's been that.
Hmm. Interesting. Now, um, we met at the HP Lovecraft Film Festival this year, and you were on two panels. One I was on when we talked about, our video games getting weird, but also one that was really one of my favorite panels of the whole year, was sort of about aquatic horrors.
Hmm.
Can you maybe share a little bit about maybe some of your feelings from those panels?
Sure, yeah. So aquatic horror was a really interesting one because I think this concept of water, at first you think, oh, okay, water. Like, immediately that brings up ideas of like Jaws, big creatures in the water, and those creature feature movies that we often associate with deep water. But if you think
Or the deep
about,
ones in Lovecraft?
yeah, yeah, deep ones in Lovecraft as well. But if you really think about it, water is so pervasive. Water is inside of us. Water is in bodies of water outside. Water is in the air. Water transforms itself. It cycles. But also, water is used for transformation in so many ways. Water, through water, there's baptism, but through water, there's also, the conversion of water into tea is there's a ceremony that happens with that where the water kind of changes its form and becomes something else. water becoming holy water. So there's all this stuff that we as people ascribe to water as a way of washing ourselves, cleansing ourselves, changing ourselves, or being consumed by the things that in the water. So as a element or mechanic or focus for storytelling, there's so much that you can really do with like aquatic or a water horror, because there is this fear of water because you can die in it. But at the same time, we do so much to harness water for ourselves because we have to use it and consume it. And one of the things,
or part water.
exactly, and one of the things I find very interesting is how much water carries from us and takes from us. You know, it takes our waste, it takes our, in some stories, it takes our memories, right? It carries a lot of us, and then it blends it all together. So, you know, someone's water over here ends up being the water. It cycles through. And I think there's a lot of interesting storytelling that can come from that. We mentioned a few movies. We've mentioned the deep ones, but even like Dune, you know, the water of life, like things that happen with water, I think is just really fascinating. It's kind of, I want to be a little punny here, untapped. I mean, it's tapped, but it's like untapped. It's sort of like, you know, bottomless. Like you can keep going after it, and I'd like to see more exploration of, you know, how to use elements like water and how we can continue to use that in storytelling.
When you said this on the panel, so I actually, between the thought I had, between my age at 8 and 16, I actually grew up on a boat.
Mm-hmm.
And so between that age, I lived, it was just, you know, a 35-foot power boat, but the hull where my bunk was, where my bed was underwater actually.
Yeah.
And and that was something that I always grew up with, that was this knowledge that when I slept, even though I had this, you know, wood that kept it out, that I was surrounded by water. And, you know, and that was that's sort of an experience I know other people have had, but I always thought about it, you know, that there just wasn't an English word to describe that.
Yeah. I mean, the way that sound travels through water or movement happens in water, it's all different. It's a different medium. And, you know, we're at a disadvantage when we're in water because we're not designed to be at our, I guess, have our optimal movement in water, right? I mean, we can be fast, but we're not going to really be able to get away from many things, and we can't breathe in water. So yeah, it's a really interesting it's an interesting concept to play with. I mean, there's so many facets to explore. One of the things that I wrote about in a while ago was I call it a calligraphy horror story, where it's about Chinese calligraphy, where you have like a block of ink and it's dry, and then you rub it, but you mix it with water, and you can change the thickness of in the density of your ink based on how much water you use to dilute it, right? And so, I mean, the concept of using water to change even what we use to write with, and how we express like the strength of maybe our images by how you know, how dense the ink is and what we use. I mean, it's just there's so much metaphor that you can play with in that. And also when you give ink that liquid, it can be carried then, and it can be, you know, like chromatography, you can pull the water, can pull it up, it gets into the paper. I mean, there's just so much about how much water is a part of the writing process that I think you know, it's just very interesting to see how that can be played with.
Yeah, absolutely. And what were maybe some of your thoughts about our video games getting weirder?
Oh, you know, one of the things is that I was a moderator for that panel, and I was very upfront with the fact that I didn't play very many video games because I think I have like some weird spatial thing where I can't read maps very well, so I'm always lost trying to figure out where to go and not get shot in some of
I make the
these
people walk into walls.
yeah. So, but when I was you know, thinking about it, I was like, well, you know, there's so much impressive storytelling that's happening in video games, and it's kind of cross pollinating between, I think, board gaming and video gaming, and kind of just going back and forth. And I've been thinking about how even if I don't play myself, I like to watch other people play video games because I see the story unfold in a very interactive way. and it's a cohesive story. So I was in my mind I was thinking, oh, it's like Pac-Man, it's the same thing over and over again. But no, I mean the video games now, I mean there's weirdness to it because things don't behave the way they're supposed to behave in what we call, I guess, the real world. But also the story is fascinating because it's unfolding in a way that's like a book, but the story can be different by the choices you make. So
Yeah.
in some of the board games I've played, and I've seen this in video games too, if you make certain choices, then that affects which ending you get. And you go back and you play it again, and it might be a different ending or a different arc for a character. And yeah, that's fairly complex because that's I'm kind of curious to see how that's gonna play out in the future. One of the things I was saying recently to someone, and this is what kind of scares me, but also fascinates me, is the AI like Midjourney and all those AI bots that are now able to just crank out AI images based on prompts.
Yeah.
And I thought, wouldn't it be fascinating if I like was able at one point to give one of these bots like the prompt for a video game. I want this and this and this and this to happen, or I want this and this and this, and like this is the alternatives. And then it'll just look at all the video games that have been ever made, and it'll just generate one for you to play.
Yep.
And I don't think that's too far away, but that would be really interesting to see what would happen if we gave prompts and see what storytelling comes from that.
I'm willing to bet there are people that are playing with the idea right now.
Yeah, yeah. So we just have to stay ahead, or otherwise we'll be obsolete.
Yeah. Well, it is, as always, a pleasure speaking with you. But before we go, the show has sort of a signature question we always ask at the end. And so that is, if you could be in charge of any creative project, any medium, you don't have to worry about copyrights, you don't have to worry about money, what would your dream project be?
Well, that's a really good question. There's so many projects that I'd like to do, but one of the ones I think that just takes a lot of time. And if I could live forever, that would be another
Yeah.
part of that prompt. Um, is to be able to go into different communities and record their stories. Especially for me, I have a strong love for the supernatural and for ghost stories and family secrets. And so going in and talking to communities and being able to preserve some of that lore that
Yeah.
is shared but not necessarily written down would be really interesting to me. And that would, involve going to a lot of different communities and just seeking out elders, seeking out, this passing of knowledge and passing of stories that people are like, oh yeah, my so and so told me about this thing that happened. And I love those stories because
Yeah.
those are the unpublished um, stories that really make up our community narrative, and we don't always get those stories out and to the general consumption population, right? And so that's the type of thing that I would like to do, but it would be a lot of work and a lot of time and probably a lot of money. So
Yeah. Yeah. Probably a lot of people too, but you know.
yep. Yeah, but it would be really interesting. I mean, even in our own families, I'm sure in your family you have these stories that of interesting characters, of people, and unless that gets preserved and passed down, it just kind of goes away. And that's kind of a shame for me anyway. I think there's so much to be collected and shared.
Yeah, my aunt recently discovered that I guess her great or great aunt, all of her husbands apparently died under very mysterious circumstances.
Oh, interesting.
And I hadn't heard that one yet.
You better. Is it inheritable?
We'll find out. Well, as always, it is just a pleasure to talk to you, and we'll hope to have you on the show again. Um,
Yeah.
and again, yeah, just we definitely want to hear more, especially as you get closer to the project with the youth groups.
Oh yeah. I think we're gonna try to put together an anthology
Hmm.
um, for the young writers because there's nothing that's more satisfying than to see a kid's eyes light up when they sign their story or they sign something. And, someone's like, oh, I'd like to buy this anthology, would you please sign your story?
Yeah.
Like you just see like this moment of wow, I did this. And so that's a great thing to be a part of. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always such a delight and pleasure to talk with you and to everyone.
Well, thank you. Great show. Also, I had an idea here too. We run commercials. So if you've got some ideas, and between me and I say me and DB, but DB's got the technical side. If you have like things of recording stuff that you want to put down for commercials for the project and the the horror association, we'll absolutely run it, and we'll help you make them.
Okay, great. There is an anthology is coming out for the essays from Asian women in horror, and that's going to be in February. But we can do something where she's like, oh, it's coming out in February. It's basically a collection of all these women who write about why they write about horror.
Okay,
right,
cool.
because it goes into some of the culture of different family lore. There's definitely some women who are haunted by their their past relatives who've done things and that's passed down. And another things I write about a story that's an ancient tale about a demon who disguises herself as human by wearing painted skin. So that's a pretty famous tale. That's a big thing, but it's not as known here. And kind of I tie it with Asian hate crimes and incidents and how it kind of blends in with that. So yeah, I do a lot of that. But yeah, that would be awesome.
And we definitely could do shout outs too. So
okay.
Let us know if things are going out. We can definitely do shout outs for you.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. And so when I don't think I have a link to your podcast. I know that we talked about it at the panel.
So it's I'll send one on it. It's the People's Guide to Cthulhu Mythos, but I'll send it to you on Facebook.
Okay, great. Just writing all this stuff down. But yeah, no, this is like so great, and thank you so much for doing this. I'm just so happy that we're actually relatively close to each other.
Yeah.
You're on a farm with goats. I'm on a farm with my kids. But you know what? It's really not that far.
Is it an actual farm or?
Well, mine's more of a jungle. No, it's not really a farm.
Yeah.
Mine's more like it's a clutter jungle.
That's where we start.
Oh, I don't know. I hope it ends at some point.
Yeah. So when we moved in, this place that we are now, it was there were hoarders.
Oh, okay. Well.
And it was literally 8.5 tons of stuff we took out of the barn. We know because we weighed it.
Yeah. Wow.
And we cut back a blackberry bush, and there was a jacuzzi.
No.
It wasn't working jacuzzi, but yeah, there was a jacuzzi.
Wow. That's amazing. How do you even hide that?
Well, yeah, it's amazing what blackberries would do.
Yeah, wow. But I guess in a way that's kind of good because it makes for great stories. Like, what if you had if you cut out the blackberries and you found the jacuzzi and then you found more? Like, I would.
So my first podcast was actually about there being a secret Illuminati base underneath the goat farm.
Can you send that to me?
Yeah, we still do some of it about the city. It's I'll find the link. It's Dave's Undergoat Goat Shenanigans.
Okay, yeah, I need this.
I'll find that.
I need.
Welcome to Innsmouth, stranger.
Hi, I'm Rob Whiten from the Innsmouth Book Club. Join me and my fellow guide John Chadwick as we take you on a fortnightly tour of Innsmouth. We visit places such as the Picture House, the Library and Innsmouth Museum to discuss all aspects of weird fiction, whether it be book, film, music, TV or art. As well as that, we stop over at the Gilman House to have a chat with a resident guest. That includes authors, artists, musicians, in fact Lovecraftian creatives of all types. You can find our free shows on Patreon, and there you can also sign up as a patron, which brings you bonus content, plus a monthly PDF copy of Innsmouth News, which features articles, author spotlights, all the latest news and reviews, and more. You can find us at patreon.com/InnsmouthBC. We hope to see you soon, because remember, Innsmouth isn't just a place, it's a state of mind.
Thank you once again for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos.
You know what the craziest thing, Dave?
What?
I saw an actual goodness ad for a stone ground chocolate company out of Lovecraft country, and on my stuff, and that company is Taza Chocolates out of Somerset, one of our sponsors. So I want to say, check out Taza Chocolates. They're big enough now that they have ads. So
Yes, I noticed some. I noticed that they were at our local supermarket, so I think some people are going to get some Taza chocolates in their stockings this year.
Oh, nice, very nice. All right. Well, enough for that. Hey, Dave.
Yes.
What do you think of when you think of neutral planes? Like, do you have a favorite one of the six?
Well, again,
Seven.
they're sort of. I mean, you gotta love Limbo.
Yeah.
But I was joking. I was saying it was like a flyover plane.
Uh-huh.
But it is. I mean, I don't think that. I don't think that it is used in most games unless you're going from like heaven or hell.
Yeah, or you're doing a planescape heavy where it's like almost required that you go to Limbo or the Abyss at some point in time. Arborea, maybe Yasgard if you want to run up and down Yasdrill a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. There's some pretty cool ones though. I mean, Arcadia is a peaceful kingdom where like lawfully good and lawfully neutral types just kind of hang out, and it's kind of like your standard fantasy kingdom, but like lawful neutral. There's a lot of military type stuff, like a lot of military parades, but not a lot of battles.
And it's kind of like the Switzerland of the Outer Plains.
Yeah. And then if we're gonna go with like the next down from it, we have Mechanus, which Mechanus is a series of gears. It's what keeps the outer planes aligned, and these gears can be like 60 kilometers across, 120 miles across, whatever, and they just slowly turn. There's little tiny kingdoms on each one, or like Deities' realm over a series of them. And have you ever done much with Mechanus there, Dave? The Clockwork Nirvana?
No, I have not. And it's kind of it's kind of got my mind kind of running, because there's so much that you could do in sort of a kind of a steampunk heaven.
Yeah. No, and it's a steampunk heaven, and there's a group of creatures called the Modrons, which are like the equivalent of angels in Mechanus, and they go around making sure that everything works. And once every cycle, the Primus of Mechanus sends out a group of these creatures to walk around the outer planes and make sure that everything's aligned. And yeah. So you have this massive horde of these clockwork creatures walking around, like if we're to think of the outer planes as like a donut shape, they go from Mechanus to Acheron to Beator to Gehenna, or I think they actually go the other way around. They go from Mechanus to Arcadia, Mount Celestia, Biotopia, Elysium, Beastlands, by the Great Road, a road that you can walk around all of the outer planes, and they make their way around, and mostly they lose a lot of them, and start to lose them in like the Beastlands and Arborea and Yasgard, and a huge amount of them in the Abyss, and it just kind of gets better before they get to Acheron and then back to Mechanus. But
and I think this is a great dimension to have, mechanical beings as NPCs, and I do love constructs as a race. So this would be a great place to maybe have a kingdom or a realm that is being, all of a sudden all these constructs are falling out and into the ground out of the sky, and it's because there's a rip to Mechanus.
Oh yeah, definitely. Or they're on their grand march, or you have one that's rogue, that's no longer part of the hive mind of the of them, and is now like trying to be its own adventurer or something like that. There's a lot you can do with Mechanus, and that you can do with its denizens. Up next, what we have is Acheron, or I don't know. That's how I've always pronounced it.
Which is, I think, in Ohio.
Yeah.
Don't they have rubber factories there?
They do. That's where most of America's rubber comes from, is Acheron. It's an infernal battlefield that's lawful neutral, lawful evil. It's a place of giant metal structures clanging into one another, and generally they start out as cubes, and the further in deep down you go into, it's things get destroyed, things get smashed up, but they're giant cubes with battles going on all sides, and people living on these cubes that smash into each other, and then the battles go from one cube to another. It's
kind of like Ohio.
Yes, yeah. And it's occupied by a lot of like people who loved war in their lifetime, but not like state of civility, but like active war. People who like, want to be buried on the battlefield. And it's also a place of like humanoids, like hobgoblins and goblins and that sort. But yeah, a lot of like just battle. But yeah. What else can I say about it real quick?
And I'm sure there are people probably going to write in and say how they had this just amazing 2-year campaign there.
Oh yeah.
But I've other than just like as background material, I've never really seen it in a game.
Yeah. No. I've always used it as something that you cross through. It's kind of like a threshold. Like you can't go to hell without, if you're walking on the Great Road, you can't go to hell without first having to go through Acheron. Just because the fact that it's not really supposed to be a threshold, but it can be treated like a threshold. But also it's like maybe has like a lot of gates, and maybe there's no reason ever to go there. No one ever wants to go there, but So okay, let's go to the next one, and that's Yasgard. How do you pronounce that, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, it may be officially Isgard, but yeah, Yasgard.
Okay, all right. And so Yasgard or Isgard, it's a place of chaotic neutral, chaotic good, an eternal battleground where true heroes prove their valor. The Norse god, the god of strength, Cord, and gods of rogues tend to hang out here. It's
Valhalla.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like a Thor comic book when Thor's on his planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, where you go out and you fight and then you come back, it's basically the D&D version of Valhalla.
Yeah. This is a place that I think people would tend to go more than, say, Acheron, but yeah. Up next, as I said before, it's like a place that you have to go if you're playing Planescape, and that is Limbo. It's a place where, it's best described as nothing is there, but also at the same times you've got bits and pieces of landscape, of land and water and fire and air all going on at the same time, sometimes mixing up, sometimes doing all kinds of crazy things.
It's the embodiment of chaos.
It is the embodiment of chaos. There's places of stability, of various deities throughout Dungeons and Dragons. Like Tempest has a place called the Night's Rest, where you can battle and then the next day wake up and you're alive so that you can drink and then battle some more. And it's a place of complete chaos. Anything goes. It doesn't have angels. It has these frog type guys called Slod.
Slod, yeah.
And also ancient, and this is specifically Dungeons and Dragons, an ancient race of humanoids that used to be the slaves of the mind flayers, the Illithids, known as the Githzerai. And they have huge monasteries, the Githzerai, in Limbo, where they meditate. So...
Yeah, and that kind of... And I know that they were sort of a psionic race and everything, but a sort of a monk race. Mm-hmm, and it kind of makes sense that they are able to... They have to overcome the physical surroundings of chaos to reach that level.
Definitely. Yeah. Limbo tends to be the one that is most, you're most likely to live longer in Limbo and Mechanist than you would, say, in Acheron. And the next one, Pandemonium.
That place is crazy.
It's a series of complex caves, puzzles, howling winds. The residents, it's much like an insane asylum. It's everyone's relatively insane, and no one knows what's going on. It's kind of like it's kind of like a series of massive long tunnels that people live in, where everyone's trying to figure out how to get out, but no one knows who to trust, where to go. It's a no good. It's very bad. Let's see. It's pitch black catacombs, winds that drive people mad. It's an infinite network. Let's see, who lives here? Oh, hey, the god of hate and slaughter. That's no fun. But the winds drive people crazy, and just like not being able to see anything or not being able to see very well it's a bad place.
But it's not the full hells.
No. This is just places. These are places that in other mythologies would be the place between heaven and hell. That's what a lot of these central planes, these negative planes are. but also they have their own thing going on. They're not just a place that's there to be there, except for that one. I'm pretty sure Acheron's just there to be there.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So anything that you would do with these central planes, Dave? These neutral planes.
So again, it's going to be sort of. I mean, the one thing kind of nice about this is that people aren't really used to it.
Yeah.
And I mean that. So you definitely have a new adventure. You have something that they're not ready for, or they don't. Your rules lawyer doesn't have all memorized.
No.
But at the same part, unless it's going to be a Planescape campaign, you don't really see a lot of those.
No. I want to say until you get to like your 20th level campaigns and you have like people who are just like, yeah, I can totally go toe to toe with a red slad. Yeah, no, I can totally run around an Acheron, jump from cube to cube, and I've got all this amazing magic that all these like battle guys aren't gonna give me much problem, or like, I don't know. I feel like once you get to a higher level of D&D, when you and your cohorts are, yourselves like might as well be gods. The outer planes don't really seem to be much of a problem until you get to deities and such. And I mean it's like I think Planescape, like low level planural adventures are crazy fun, and higher level planural adventures are crazy fun too when you're in like god mode. But yeah.
Yeah. So you want kind of a trivia question, a trivia fact?
Yeah.
So you know that Gazinki and Gazathi and Salads, do you know who created those?
No.
Charles Stross.
Okay.
Who is been a guest speaker at the HP Lovecraft Film Festival.
Oh, wow.
Most famous for his, he's a really interesting person. He signed a couple of books, but he did the library, or not library, the laundry, which is basically English spies.
Okay.
He did a really good the Colder War, which is basically an Soviet American arms race using mythos technology. But yeah, he invented, and I think he did it right first for like White Dwarf magazine. But a lot of his stuff is going to be codified in Fiend Folio.
Okay.
That's great by Charles Stross, who is only 3 years older than me. So like when I was 17, I was reading his stuff, and he was like 20, and he was writing it. But yeah, he so a lot of this comes from him.
Okay. All right. And something I wanted to say is many of these outer planes do have their own kind of like angels or devils or patrons. Mechanus has interesting ones. Limbo has interesting ones. Yasgard, Pandemonium, Acheron, and Arcadia do not. I mean, you just go, oh, that's like someone who lives here. Okay, that makes sense that someone who's like, I'm scared, and has their hair stuck up like like it's crazy, that they would be a petitioner of Pandemonium, and like some Thor type guy would be like the petitioner of Yasgard, and Arcadia, pretty much the same thing, except for I'm Mr. Military. I love military stuff, but pretty much, it's I don't know. it's some of them are really boring, so they're not that interesting. But Limbo
and a
has,
lot of that depends on your DM too. It's very
Yeah.
boring on paper, but your DM can sort of change it around.
Certainly. And yeah, they are kind of boring on paper, or at least boring in the old second edition Planescape, or second and a half, 2.5, whatever you want to call it. Later second edition D&D, they were kind of portrayed as not very interesting, but I'm sure you could do a lot with them now. I'm trying to think of any of the other types of deities and the other types, or patrons, and a lot of them aren't that interesting. It's just like Mount Celestia has stuff that people still would, I don't know, maybe it's just a bias of me. But yeah. All right. So, Dave, we're at that point of the show where we're saying goodbye to everyone and recommending things. Is there anything you've been watching lately that you want to shout out and tell people about?
There's a couple of things that I've been really interested in.
Yeah.
And one is, and I'm only halfway through, and I have to admit I haven't gotten to the Lovecraft ones yet. Is Benicio del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities.
Gotcha.
Which is basically his version of Twilight Zone / meets, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And there is a couple of really good ones. One is Graveyard Rats by Henry Kuttner. And I just happened to get a zombie pulp book. Just an impulsive buy. And it's had there. So I just read the story. And the story is only 7 pages long.
Yeah.
And the episode's close to like 50 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so there has to be some fluff. So they've added, some motivation and a couple of extra items, but it's really, really faithful to the short story.
Okay, cool. That sounds awesome. What I have been doing lately is I have been on YouTube while editing stuff for this week and next week and the week after for the daily shows. Is I have been watching Mystery Science Theater 3000, Riff Tracks, all available on online on YouTube. There's a bunch of
and they're
free
going to have their
ones.
own channel soon.
Oh yeah. No, they have their own channel right now that you can go to. I'm not going to do an ad for them. You look it up yourself. But if you go to YouTube, you can look for Mystery Science Theater 3000 Riff Tracks, and there's all kinds of stuff. And then I was like, oh, I wonder, and I was just like looking at old horror movies on, I think, HBO Max, and I ran across Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I was going to say Day of the Triffids or Night of the anyway. But Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
The original or the 70s one?
The 1978 one. And it was so much fun, but I kept expecting to hear voices being like, oh, hey, why don't you, shake her around a little bit. That'll be great for her spine. And any comments or anything like that. But no. I highly recommend classic horror movies and anything that involves robots or people off screen making comments about said movie. So, yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, I think we're going to be doing Patrick Swayze Christmas this year.
Nice. All right.
For those of you who don't watch it, that's an early Mystery Science 3000 host sketch.
Yeah.
But
yep, those are great. Those are really good. A lot of fun. All right, everyone. Thank you again so much for listening to People's Guide to the Cthulhu Mythos. I have been one of your hosts, DB Spitzer. Dave, can you say goodbye to these great folks?
Goodbye, great folks.
All right. And remember, Check us out online. We are PGTTCM. We are on the Facebook. We are on the Twitter. We're on the Instagram. We're on the YouTubes. And, of course, we've got our own website, pgttcm.com. And
we are on your mind.
Yeah, we're on your mind. And recorded and edited by DB Spitzer and David Heath. Music by DB Spitzer. And you can find us anywhere you find podcasts, and share, tell people about us, and all that kind of fun stuff. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. That was a good episode.
Very good.
You're listening to KZOM, Oleander Public Radio.